Is that coming up over there, guys?
Okay, Rob, we're recording.
Yeah, recording. So I just wanted to say for the Zoom guys, we had a bit of a technology story here because we hadn't given the Shiur for a while. The computer put me through a security check. I had to go and find codes, and it's quite interesting. And wanted to be sure that it was me trying to log into the Zoom account here in Michael's house and on this internet. So I didn't expect it. It came through with a whole security story, but we got through it and we logged in. Are you not getting in? Okay.
Right, I must now mute this.
Now you can just mute it.
Okay.
It is 37A.
No, that's it.
The guys that are here need to mute, otherwise we'll have an echo.
This doesn't make sense. I think no brain, but it's an option value. So it's a simple it's a simple brain.
Okay, just catch a little l'chaim there. Benji, can we trouble you to do the pouring?
Yeah.
A small one. Hey, Danny, how are you?
I've got these. What's the other cold?
What's this?
Breakfast.
No, the bread.
I can't read them up because
A bit more.
my
A
personal
little bit more, yeah.
I'll put
That's
it up
good.
if you want to.
Shalom Aleichem.
Thank you, Benji.
No, it's fine. My daughter's, I think she buys gluten free products from me. I think we sell gluten free stuff.
Listen,
Okay.
Haven't you connected your microwave?
Fine, and you.
Where do you see Rodney picking?
instead of lasting for 6
I
hours.
saw him at the park. I took my dog.
Hey, guys.
The big park, apple grape park.
Gentlemen on Zoom, we got some, I wish I could offer you, but we have some lovely stuff from DJs. Just playing the guys on the computer. Yeah, you might want to get in the car and come.
Oh, really?
Really 6 years.
Good guy.
Yeah,
Get up for that.
we're ready to roll. Let's go for it. Is everybody ready?
Oh, water.
Everybody ready? Can we go for it?
Yeah.
So just to remind everybody where we were in the Gemara, if you find a place, Jeff, 37A.
A5. Just tell me where
What
it
is
is.
Zora?
Yossi ben Yoezer is trader. Should I have a quick look? Because I've got a
Is it
different text.
rabbis do not agree with Rabbi Yosef.
It's 37A, not 37A5.
37.
37A.
No, they're all.
No, but they're all 37A, they're all numbered.
All numbered.
Yeah. I could show it to you inside, I think. Let me find it, because my text is different, so the best. Hopefully I'll manage without the, I must pack my reading glasses. Are they +2? +2.
More or less plus one.
Oh, wow. Oh, yeah, that does it. Just to help him find the place for the computer.
They actually suit you, Rabbi.
That's your suit.
Matches the suit, yeah.
No, this is whiskey. And black label.
Yeah. It is 345. 345 lines. 5 lines. From a optometrist.
Yeah,
Not just like that.
It's my prescription.
That's
It's
your
more,
prescription.
it's more or less the same.
It's the same.
Thanks. Where's it from?
Just like an insert. It's like that.
So from the bottom of the
Yeah.
page,
Yes.
go. Oh, I didn't look on the English side. I looked only on the Hebrew side.
Is it
No, it should say Gufa Hey Yossi ben Yoezer. Gufa
No, I understand that. But
Must be
yeah, I've got kufa.
Have you got Kufa, right?
Yeah,
Towards the end of the
the
page.
text itself.
The text itself. Yeah, yeah,
Yes.
yeah. Okay, so let's go for it, everybody. L'chaim to a successful new year of learning. L'chaim to a successful year of learning.
Very sure.
What the word?
Kufa Haid Yossi Ben Yoezer. It's the bottom of Lamed Zayin Amud Aleph. Go 5 lines from the bottom. 5 lines from the bottom in the middle. Kufa. You got it. Yeah, you'll be familiar with some of it because we did.
What is it?
Lamed Zayin. What are you following?
We'll find it.
You mean
Yeah,
you want the Zoom codes?
Zoom
Zoom codes. It's like this. Okay.
In middle
That's
You want to look it up. It's Faria.org, but you're going into Zoom. How are you going in?
Sit on inside there.
Otherwise, you could go in via Zoom.
Oh, you want to see Benes? Only you
I'll put you on the via Zoom. Okay. Back inside again. Okay, thank you. I'll have after. If you remember, the Gemara was discussing the fact that a certain Beth Din, which was led by Yossi ben Yoezer Ish Tzreida, you'll remember this name. Yossi ben Yoezer Ish Tzreida is famous from Pirkei Avos, in those zugot, in those pairs that are mentioned at the beginning of Ethics of Our Fathers of Pirkei Avot. Yossi ben Yoezer Ish Tzreida is one of the leaders or sages that is mentioned over there. And in this Gemara, it was said earlier in the discussion about bread and wine and various other things that he made some lenient rulings. And as a result of his lenient rulings, he was given a derisive nickname as the permissive one. In other words, the fellow who liked to let people off the hook. Yossi the Sharia, the one who let people off the hook. He wasn't. You know, sometimes people will say, whether it's in a shul or a community, they might say that rabbi is very strict. If you don't want the easy answer, you better go shopping for someone else. And sometimes they'll say that somebody's very lenient. So he had a reputation, his Beth Din had a reputation for being very lenient, or makel, as we say. Not necessarily was that so. There's always a context to everything, and he's a big tzaddik, but nonetheless, that's what happened. And it all came about, as the Gemara discussed, from a number of rulings that he gave. 3 rulings that he was famous for giving. We spoke about some of them already. And of the 3 rulings, he ruled contrary to all the other rabbis. In 2 out of 3 cases, he ruled more makel, more lenient than all the others. And that's how he got this name. One of them was he ruled about a particular kind of locust. So we might not be that familiar with it. Certainly not the Ashkenazim. I don't know if you know any Sephardim that are eating arbe. No, it's a plague this week in the parsha. You asked for parsha. Yeah. So when it talks about which animals are kosher and which are not kosher, so there is a certain kind of locust that qualifies as a kosher animal. The Torah explains about Asheloi Knofayim, that it has a certain type of wing structure. This is less known because of the fact that we don't run around eating them as much. Like most people will know that if you're talking about fish, it's fins and scales. Most people will know that if you're talking about behemoths, it's split hooves and chew the cud. But most people, even learned people, hardly know the simanim, the signs, when it comes to locusts, because most of us don't eat them for breakfast, lunch, or supper.
The
teimanim, yeah. So the fact of the matter is that they're described in the Torah, and also it's a little bit biramiza. It's a little bit hidden or cryptic the way the Torah describes it.
I think the knees have to be facing to the back.
I think it describes some biological structure, but I think you got it right. Yeah.
Have to face backwards.
Yeah. So in other words, it's a certain kind of species where the knees face backwards. The Torah describes the shape, and that shape is the type that's okay. If you have another type that doesn't have exactly that shape, it's not okay. But as the Gemara will discuss, that there was a particular kind of of locust called El Kamsa. It looked a little bit like a ram, so you can see the word ayil. Yeah. Similar word to Bar Kamsa. Keep us far away from Tisha B'Av. I'm hungry. So there was a discussion about it. And Yossi ben Yoezer from Trader, one of his rulings was, I wanted to just say it outside first, so it's easier when we go inside. One of his rulings was about the El Kamsa, that locust is permitted, contrary to others that said it's not one of the permitted species, and the Gemara will discuss why. And the other one we actually spoke about earlier in the Gemara, but this is actually the source sheet now. The Gemara spoke about a special ruling that was given regarding the blood that was spilt, the liquids that flowed in the temple slaughterhouse, and the fact that they were immune to tumah, they were not susceptible to ritual impurity, to tumah, because that was the temple. So rules that might have applied in other places didn't apply on the floor of the temple where they were slaughtering. And then there was a third idea. This will be unpacked more, so don't worry if it's not fully crystal clear now. The third one was about contact with the dead. Now, most of us will assume automatically that contact with the dead makes someone impure. Most Jewish children learn it from when they're very small. Kohanim know that they don't belong very close, in close contact with the meitim, with dead bodies, because of the fact that Kohanim are not supposed to make themselves impure on purpose, except for in exceptional circumstances. So there was a ruling with regard to that. The Gemara is not exactly sure what his ruling was, but it's going to discuss it afterwards. But as a result of these three rulings, which two appeared to be lenient and one appeared to be strict, later on the Gemara unpacks it and figures out that all three were actually leaning lenient. But because of that, he got this nickname, Yosef Sharia, Yosef the one who permits. So let's just read it inside. Gufa, the Gemara is saying, let's go to the text itself. And it's good to know also the technique of Gemara, because we learn it all the time, and there's thousands and thousands of platim of pages, but there's certain techniques which are consistent everywhere. The concept of gufa means a body. The Gemara was all over the place. It's a type of discussion which moves here and it moves there and it moves everywhere. So sometimes it's like gufa is a consolidation. It's almost like when they said, you've quoted this and you've quoted that, take me to the source. Where was the original discussion about this matter? So we already, in our discussion earlier, mentioned that he was called a permissive bet din, that he gave leniencies, like some of his colleagues gave leniencies with regard to the decrees on bread and the decrees on milk. And now the Gemara wants to know, what was that original discussion? Go back to the source. So Gufa, the source itself, Hayid Yosef ben Yoezer ish Tzreida. Yosef ben Yoezer, who was a man or a sage from Tzreida, gave testimony, gave a ruling, al El Kamsa, concerning a locust species called El Kamsa Dochan, that it is kosher. Some people say it's not, I say it is. That was one. Al Mashke Beimid Bachaya, and regarding the liquids of the temple slaughterhouse, you know, when you slaughter animals, you're going to have a lot of blood flowing and maybe other bodily fats and liquids, that the liquids that flow in the Bay Mitbachaya, and you can even see the Hebrew word mitbach over here, or tevach, that the liquids which flow in the Bay Mitbachaya in the temple slaughterhouse, they are immune from tumah. They cannot become tameh. And the Gemara will explain. The liquids that come about in the temple slaughterhouse, you know, they're shechting animals. We read in this morning's reading, or Rosh Chodesh, you know, you read about all these animals that are getting slaughtered there. So you can imagine there was a bit of a mess. You know, you're slaughtering animals. If you've ever been to the schlachtois, as they call it, the abattoir, you're going to see things flowing. There's going to be a lot of, you need a good stomach for that. I mean, not everybody can handle that. Yeah.
And she's
still running around. Yeah. It's a good way to become a vegetarian if you want to become a vegetarian.
never been. I climbed around last year.
So anyway, so the questions, there was a ruling that although in other places, liquids, foods, that either beverages, which is basically drinks and gravies and anything liquid, or liquids that develop from a manufacturing process or a killing process, like in the slaughterhouse, they can be susceptible to tumah. If they come in contact with things which are not clean spiritually, they can be susceptible. The rabbis made a ruling that the mashke beimit bechaya, that the liquids in the slaughterhouse are immune. They cannot become susceptible to tumah. Again, the Gemara discusses it later. So mashke beimit bechaya dochan, that it's 100%, it's not impure. And if somebody touches a dead body, he becomes unclean or impure. The Gemara discusses what he meant, because obviously he wasn't saying the obvious. We know that's obvious. So what did he actually mean? It gets unpacked a bit later. And based on these statements that he made, V'karulei Yosef Sharia, they called him Joseph or Yosef, the permissive one. Sharia means lahatir. You know what I mean? He makes everything mutar. He doesn't prohibit anything. Huh? My al-kamsa. My al-kamsa. So the Gemara asks, what is the al-kamsa? What is the al-kamsa? What kind of locust was al-kamsa? And what kind of argument was there about it? So the Gemara says there are two opinions. There's Rav Papa's opinion and Rav Chia Bar Ami's opinion in the name of Ula. Rav Papa said Shoishiva, that the al-kamsa locust was what's called a shoishiva. So people who know their biology and know what a shoishiva is know now what an al-kamsa is. But we'll go into the English explanation. And Rav Chia Bar Ami Mishmei de Ula, Rav Chia Bar Ami reporting in the name of Ula, Amar Suzbil, says it's called Suzbil. What's the difference between these two? What these two descriptions of the al-kamsa. So let's just talk about this a little bit outside before we read it inside. Basically, you had a debate between the Tanaim, the Mishnah sages, Rabbi Yosef ben Yoezer and the sages, about this particular species called al-kamsa. Is it kosher? Is it not kosher? Is it one of the locusts that the Torah permitted, or isn't it? Why was it in doubt? What was the issue? So the issue was as follows. It's actually a nice example. You know, we have in our davening every morning, we say, Rabbi Yishmael Omer b'shloishes remidas haTorah nidreshes. Rabbi Yishmael taught that there are 13 formulae which you use to interpret Torah. And it talks about all of them. Kal v'chomer, Gzeira Shavat, Tzada Shavat. There's a whole bunch of different formulas that are the main 13 formulas that our sages would use in order to calculate and work out through these formulae the matters of Torah. One of them is klal uprat and klal uprat to klal. One of them is klal means a generalization. When you talk about the klal, you're talking about in general. And when you talk about prat, you're talking about specific, private or targeted or focused. Klal uprat means when the Torah speaks b'derech klal in a general way, the Torah says something in a general way, and then you notice maybe a few verses later, it starts to get more detailed and specific. What is that rule, klal uprat? That the Torah might begin by saying something that sounds very general, but then it starts to specify exactly what it means. A little bit like our teachers used to do, you know, it'd say, you can do everything, but not really everything. What I mean by everything is this, that, and the other. You can go out into the playground and you can do those things, but not others. So sometimes one starts in a general way and gets more specific. What you're seeing is when the Torah, when it's klal uprat, the Torah is so-called limiting the klal. The klal was a bigger category that the Torah might have said is okay, and the prat is more limiting. So the rule of klal uprat is that the Torah might have said something first as a klal, as a general rule, and then specified something more specific. In this case, in this example, the Torah might have said generally, if you want to know what locusts are kosher, Saul mentioned before, they had a very interesting leg structure, that it has a certain kind of structure of the way the knees are shaped. They face backwards. I'm trying to remember the wording in the pasuk. I think something asher knafayim, something lenateir bahen ala aretz. Six pairs of legs, six legs. So the Torah gave a siman. That's like a general rule that if it has this shape, then that's the klal, then it's kosher. Yeah. Exactly. Now you would think, what would we think initially? That any locust that has this shape,
Like fish, every
yeah,
fish.
exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly. Like every fish has a fin and a scale. So every locust that has these simanim is okay. But then the Torah goes and lists out 4 specific species. It says this one and this one and this one and this one. That's called, according to the rabbis, klaluprat. It limited it down. First, it gave a general idea, and then it said it's these 4 that must fit in these names. You got to go to your biologist or whatever it is, the fellow that names different creatures, and these 4 types are okay. Other types, even if they have the siman as per the klal, it's not good enough. So that was the way that some rabbis understood the way it was in the Torah. But then, according to Yossi ben Yoezer Shrader, it was a klal upratu klal, that after it specified 4, it went back and regeneralized it, as if to say the reason for the 4 specific examples is to tell you that any just like this would be exactly the same. You know, like where the Torah says, for instance, where's another example? The Torah might say things, don't cook a goat in the milk of his mother. Does that mean a cow also? Yes. The Torah used the example of a baby goat, but the Torah meant all behemoths. It didn't only mean goats or lambs. It meant also even a cow. The laws of Bacher b'chalav apply to. So according to one side, it was klal uprat only, which means the Torah generalized a siman and then gave a specific 4 species. And according to the other type, it generalized, gave 4 specifics, and then generalized again. And therefore, anything similar. Because of that, there was a particular kind of locust called the Eilkamtza, mentioned over here, which had a long head. It was a long-headed locust. It was distinct for a very long-shaped head. And according to this, the sages said that this locust was prohibited because it doesn't fit in the 4 species that were listed, even if its shape and style looks the same. And according to Yossi ben Yoezer Shrader, it doesn't matter. It's good enough if it's similar to those categories that the Torah mentioned. So let's just read it inside. Rav Papa Omar, Rav Papa taught Sheishiva that this locust called El Kamtza is the Sheishiva. And what is the argument? The Gemara then unpacks v'kama pliga. The difference is B'roishei Aruch, about a locust with a long head, a long-headed locust called an El Kamtza. Mar Sovar, one opinion holds Roishei Aruch Asur. That's the opinion of the rabbis, that the long-headed locust is prohibited, it's not kosher. Umar Sovar, and the other opinion, Yossi ben Yoezer, Roishei Aruch Mutar, that the long-headed locust is permitted. In the other way of understanding the argument, Rav Chia bar Ami Mishmei de Ula Omar. Rav Chia bar Ami, in the name of Ula, said, we're talking about, and this is where we turn over the page to Lamed Zayin Omid Beis, Suzbil, that this El Kamtza was not a Sheshiva, it was another locust called a Suzbil. That's an argument over the technicalities of locusts. But Roishei Aroich, according to him, the long-headed locust, Kula Almaloi Plega de Asur, everybody agrees, is prohibited. No one's arguing. That guy is not like the locusts that are kosher. V'hacha here, b'knaf of chayfines rubai al yadayatcha komiklugri. The argument is how much its wings cover most of the body of the animal or insect. Mars, over one opinion, Yossi ben Yoezer Shrader holds Ruba Koldahu, a general majority, Ba'inan is required. Mars over Ruba the Minkar Ba'inan, and one holds that you need a recognizable majority. In other words, what happened here was The rabbis came along and said, in addition to the Torah's requirements, which the guys were describing before, the 6 legs and the backward shaped knees and whatever, the rabbis made another requirement. They said that a kosher locust, his wings must cover the majority of his body. You look at the shape of, it's an easy siman. If the wings cover more than 50% of the body, that's part of what he requires. If he has the other simanim the Torah spoke of, plus the wings covering the majority of the body, kosher. If the wings don't cover the majority of the body, then he's not kosher. Now, when it came to a certain locust called a suzbil, which the Gemara is talking about here, he was right on the border. It became a bit of a gray area. Why? Because it was so just that according to Yossi ben Yoezer, it's enough. He said, like, you know what? It is a general majority. If you really had to take out your ruler or whatever the instruments they'd use, you'll find it's a majority. It's fine. According to the sages, it has to be what they call a recognizable majority, a conclusive majority. You need to look at the creature and be able to say, no doubt, these wings cover more than half of the creature. So they had an argument over this creature called a suzbil, because according to one side, it was good enough that it generally was a majority covered by its wings. And according to the other side, it's not conclusive that the wings cover the majority of the body of that locust. However, all of this is coming back to one thing. It's always good to consolidate with Gemara. That Yossi ben Yoezer permitted this locust called El Kamtza, and the sages didn't. So because his view was different to all of them, he got the reputation of being lenient, together with his other rulings. Then we came to the other ruling that he made, was about the mashke beimit bachaya. Ve'al mashke beimit bachaya dachon, we said that he also ruled that he, differently to the sages, when it came to the liquids in the temple slaughterhouse, that they are pure. So the Gemara wants to know, what does it mean that those liquids are pure? My dachon, what does it mean pure? There was a difference of opinion and argument with this, between Rav and Shmuel. Rav and Shmuel were known sparring partners, and they differed in this particular way. One of them said that this particular ruling that the sages gave, that the liquids in the temple slaughterhouse were not impure, only applied to their ability to make other things impure, but not to themselves. And the other said even Tumas Atzman, their own impurity, is included in it. In other words, to what degree did our sages give, you could say it was like a kind of immunity. They said the liquids, it's a temple slaughterhouse, it's not an ordinary place, it's not Uncle Joe's butchery, it's the temple slaughterhouse. We are ruling that no liquids that come about from the process of slaughtering inside the Beit HaMikdash in the temple courtyard, none of these liquids have a connection with Tumah. They can't be connected to impurity. What did they mean? What was the parameter of that ruling? According to one opinion, what it meant, according to Rav's opinion, Dochon Mamash, means no impurity in the absolute sense. Not the liquids themselves could become impure, nor could they be able to make other things impure. Shmuel says they could become impure. The ruling was that they couldn't make other things impure. They couldn't contract impurity. So the al mashke beibet chaya dochon my dochon Rav, Omar Rav said, dochon mamish, that means in the absolute sense, that it was ruled concerning such liquids and fluids that they were in their own right not susceptible to tumah, to ritual uncleanliness. Or Shmuel, Omar and Shmuel taught, dochon, pure means milatama acherim. Those liquids couldn't make other things impure. Tumas atzmon, but that they themselves could become impure. Yesh bohen, that could happen. That's possible. And then the Gemara continues to discuss it. Let's just run through it and we can chat. Rav Omar Rav says, the Gemara explains the difference for their position. Rav Omar Dochon Mamash Rav says that the ruling was that they were not susceptible to impurity at all, because Kosovar, he holds Tumas Mashkin de Rabbanon, that the impurity with which fluids are affected is rabbinic. Fluids as in food fluids. We're not going to talk now about people and fluids, that bodily fluids. This is about fluids that are food, beverages, or the result of manufacturing processes, like the fluids that flow from animals being slaughtered. According to Rav, the laws of ritual impurity that apply to food and drink applied to solids, according to the Torah. And fluids in general didn't have such a concept. But the rabbis came along and they ruled that even fluids and beverages could also contract impurity, not only solid food. And then, when the rabbis decreed that ritual impurity would apply to liquids, b'mashkin da'alma, general liquids, anybody's liquids. But the liquids in the temple itself, in the temple slaughterhouse, l'gazer rabbanon, they didn't make such a decree. If the rabbi said, let's make a decree that beverages could be susceptible to impurity. In other words, if you're a kohen or you're somebody who has to be careful, you have to be careful of beverages as well, not only foods. That was with regard to general, but in the temple itself, they never made such a decree. And therefore, it was an essential idea that the fluids inside the temple slaughterhouse were immune, not susceptible to tumah. Shmuel Omar, and Shmuel said that they actually were considered protected for purity, that they can't make other things impure. Aval tumas atzman, but that they themselves could become impure, that if those liquids came in contact with something impure, they could make they could become impure. Aval tumas atzman yesh bohen, their own impurity they had. Kosovar, because Shmuel is of the view, tumas mashkin de oraisa, letame achayrim de rabbanon. Shmuel's view is that the Torah also introduces the idea of spiritual uncleanliness with beverages. It's not from the rabbis only. It goes back to Torah law. The Torah does define beverages and fluids as also being susceptible to impurity. It's only that the Torah, the difference between food and drink in Torah is that solid food can make other things impure and liquids couldn't. And then the rabbis came along and added a gezeira decree that even liquids could make other things unclean or impure. L'tame achayrim de rabbanon, making other things that they come in contact with impure is the rabbanon. V'chigazu rabbanon, when the rabbis decreed b'mashkin da'alma, they decreed that general beverages and fluids could make other things impure. B'mashkin b'mid b'chaya, with regard to the beverages or the fluids of the slaughterhouse, loy gazru, that decree did not apply at all. Probably that's a good place just to stop and chat.
Just explain
It's already that's yeah. This is not. It is quite technical. It's quite hectic, but nothing wrong with exercising our brains a little bit. Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. Okay, let's okay. But let's just unpack it a little, and then we'll stop over there. The idea is like this. According to the laws in the Torah, food and drink have laws of impurity. Laws of impurity, which are not easy to understand, affect people. We spoke about chas v'sholem, people who aren't alive. They can affect people. They can be caused by bodily fluids. That's another kind of fluid. But then the Torah said that food and drink can be susceptible to ritual uncleanliness. In other words, food can become tamei. What's the issue? In today's day and age, we actually have no issue with it because there is no prohibition. The problem with that was that when it came to kodshim, holy food, like things they slaughtered in the temple, and the kohanim would eat it, or even if, like truma and things like that, or even if it was Israelites that brought an offering into the temple, and they were allowed to have a part of it, because some offerings, the Baalim, the owners, got to take home some. This was kodshim, this was holy food, it wasn't regular. And there were special laws that if food was holy, number one is you weren't allowed to on purpose make it impure by putting it in contact with something impure. In other words, you couldn't carry it into the cemetery, you couldn't carry it into a place or have it touched by someone who's not pure. And kohanim couldn't eat it. And and that was not to be done on purpose. And then there was all kinds of laws. There are laws. If you look in Shulchan Aruch, they're not as applicable today because we don't have a Beit HaMikdash. It's like in today's day and age, we have less issues because if a person's not pure, what's the problem? They can't go into the Beit HaMikdash. But if there's no Beit HaMikdash to go into, it's less of an issue. It's less of a problem. But when the Torah, coming back to what we were discussing here, when the Torah speaks of impurity with regard to food and beverages, so the Torah, so according to some rabbis, Torah law was only about food and not about fluids, about solid food and not fluids. That food, as in its solid state, is susceptible to tumah, cleanliness, but not food in its liquid state. And then the rabbis came and they said, it's too confusing for people, so we're going to make an extra decree. Besides for solid food, beverages, fluids, liquid food also will be subject to the same rules of impurity. So one is rabbinic and one is from the Torah. Solid food from the Torah, liquids are rabbinic. According to Shmuel, which is another opinion,
The witness.
Yeah.
Also is the tumor.
The wetness transfers the tumah. And that's why this is one practical example we all know. When we go and wash at the Pesach Seder, it's not so far away. The first time we wash at the Pesach Seder, it's to dip the vegetable in the salt water. Now we're getting a bit more practical. The karpas, we put it in water. Why do we have to wash? Since when do you wash for a piece of potato or onion? It's because it's wet. Yeah. It's because it's wet. And in general, that would be the rule, because if you didn't want to use a knife and fork, if you want to eat fruit and vegetables and you want to dip them in something that's wet and eat it directly with your hands to your mouth, you would have to wash. Sorry? Yeah, but it would be the Rabbanan.
But this is not the business. The business here is that any fruit and vegetable that came in touch with the liquid, it become activated to receive tumah, and you might have tumah on your hand. That's
Exactly.
Not because the liquid is not.
No, it's not the liquid, but it's the liquid is causing the liquid is causing it to become susceptible to
activated.
Yeah. But it's not actually the liquid itself. It's the liquid is preparing that fruit, that vegetable to become susceptible to tumah. But anyway, don't get too bogged down about it, because the main reason for all of us is the Gemara wanted to come out with one thing. It wanted to tell us that Yosef ben Yoezer gave a number of rulings, which were all considered to be lenient, and therefore he got this reputation as Mr. Lenient. But I think
Rabbi, the one that make another Khumrah. And another Khumrah.
Absolutely, always got it.
so. I'm going to switch off the text.
We found at the time of like 200 years ago.
But it's important to know that it's not so easy to be lenient. You have to have a backup to be lenient too. It's like if a judge wants to be lenient, they also have to have proper, how would you call it? They have to have proper grounds for that. So what we'll do, we'll continue, because this is quite technical, we'll continue with the third one. We can go through the third one. We can move quickly through it next week. And that is what Yosef ben Yoezer said about contact with the dead. Because the Gemara wants to know, it wasn't him. Everybody says that contact with the dead makes you impure. Why do they say it's a mat? And the Gemara starts to unpack what he meant when he said contact with the dead makes someone impure. Yeah, that's not so easy.
Chodesh Tov.
Yeah, that was a bit technical, Liz.
That's all good. Chodesh Tov.
Yeah. Chodesh Tov, everybody.
Bye.
I wish we could offer you guys some of the lovely pastries, burekas. You can't imagine the party, you know.
Sholem, can you give your father the video? Wow.
Hello, boys. DJ.
I'm just panning the crowd.
Very nice, wonderful. If you could show your father the video from Fachland, that would be wonderful.
That's your mom's shirt size. Oh, wow.
But you catering.